What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we will be breaking down the 7 best players to add on the waiver wire moving into week 4 of the 2023 fantasy football season. If you guys are new here, this is all we do here all year round. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. So if you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way in. But more importantly, please get in the comment section down below anything that you guys need, starts, sits, waiver wire advice, trade advice, whatever you guys need moving into week 4 of the season. Please let me know. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. So for the purpose of today's video, we are only looking at players that are rostered in 50% or less of fantasy leagues at the moment. And at the time I'm recording this, the Monday Night Football games have not been played yet. So if anything arises from those games and there are players we need to target, I will drop them in the comment section down below, as well as any other players that maybe you should be taking a look at moving into week 4. But let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video. All right, number 1 overall, no surprise here. Devonte Shane is going to be added in leagues no matter what. I mean, he's rostered in 47% of leagues at the moment, but after a 51.3 fantasy point performance, oh my goodness, how are you not making him your number 1 waiver priority approaching week 4? I mean, he had 203 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 30 receiving yards off of 4 receptions, and 2 receiving touchdowns. A historic day. There's never been a day where a running back duo has both scored 45 or more fantasy points in a single game until this past Sunday when Devonte Shane and Raheem Mostert did it. And don't get me wrong, Raheem Mostert is still going to be involved. He's still going to be a part of this committee, and maybe Jeff Wilson comes back. I don't know, but this offense looks like the best offense in the league. They're going to continue to just terrorize teams, maybe not to the point where they're scoring 70 points in a game, which, by the way, we haven't seen that happen since 1966. That's saying something about this offense collectively. We want to just pick up as many pieces as we can. Devonte Shane will get enough involvement. I talked about him a ton throughout the offseason. Loved his fit in this offense. Took a little bit of time, and yeah, we probably won't see this high of a mark, this high of a ceiling again throughout the year, but he's absolutely worth rostering. If Devonte Shane is out there, whether you need help at the running back position or not, he needs to be added from the waiver wire moving into week 4. Next up on the list, we're going to talk about Tank Dell, who we talked about in last week's video as well, after a 20.2 fantasy performance against the Colts. And while I still like them as a, low ceiling flex option moving into week 3, I didn't necessarily think he was going to potentially have as good of a game against the Jacksonville Jaguars in comparison to a really bad Colts secondary. But man, not only did Tank Dell show up, but the Texans as a whole showed up. Dell and Stroud, both in their rookie season. It really looks like that chemistry is coming together. 7 targets, 5 receptions, 145 receiving yards, 29 yards per catch, and a touchdown for Tank Dell in week 3 against Jacksonville. This offense is showing that they are passing the football at a high volume overall. So even though Nico Collins, Robert Woods, even Dalton Schultz have looked good in this offense, I think that chemistry between Stroud and Tank Dell is really going to be something we're going to have to look out for. That is going to be productive throughout the season. They have a soft matchup against Pittsburgh in week 4. He's rostered in 47% of leagues at the moment. That's not going to be the same number whatsoever after this week 3 performance, including the week 2 performance. On top of that, Tank Dell should be rostered and will be rostered moving into week 4. Right, next up on the list, we've got Josh Palmer, who unfortunately mainly makes a list because we've probably lost Mike Williams for the rest of the season, as he is now dealing with a knee injury. Nonetheless, Josh Palmer, I think, steps automatically into that wide receiver 2 spot over Quentin Johnston, who maybe in deeper leagues you could take a look at, but man, he's been really, really silent in his rookie season so far. Palmer already has that chemistry with Justin Herbert. We know this offense is going to throw the football a lot. We know their defense is not so good, so they're going to have to be playing from behind quite a bit. Josh Palmer had some good moments throughout last season. Nonetheless, in week 3 against a really bad Miami Vikings secondary, he had 14.6 fantasy points, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 66 receiving yards, and a touchdown. He's got a soft matchup in week 4 against the Raiders. And moving forward, Like I said, unfortunately, it looks like he's going to be the wide receiver 2 for the Chargers. We'll see how things turn out for Mike Williams. What we do know is that this offense, like I said, is going to throw the football. Josh Palmer, like I already said as well, has a chemistry with Justin Herbert, so he might not quite be Mike Williams level, but he's still a wide receiver 2 in an offense that throws the football a ton. He needs to be picked up moving into week 4. Next on the list, we've got Matt Breida of the Giants, rostered in 42% of leagues. And listen, I will say, this is really a low ceiling play. This is probably a short-term play as well. There's some buzz that Barkley could return in week 4 against Seattle, but the way this Giants team has looked, like, why would you rush Barkley back? I mean, we'll find out. I mean, maybe they do want him back so they can attempt to win a football game outside of a comeback against the Arizona Cardinals. But all of that aside, it's a great matchup against the Seattle Seahawks in week 4 for Matt Breida, who found a way to be productive in a really bad game against the San Francisco 49ers in week 3 at 10.8 fantasy points, 17 yards on the ground, 3 receptions, and a touchdown, which really saved his stat line. But nonetheless, he got it done, and it's a really soft matchup. Seattle's been really bad against opposing running backs. So as long as Barkley doesn't play, if you need a running back to go out and snag and plug in for the week, I think Matt Breida is a good option. And I guess he's a good handcuff throughout the rest of the season as well. But like I said, a short-term play, not the highest ceiling here, but Matt Breida, worth an RB2 spot if you're desperate moving into week 4. All right, last week we talked about Marvin Mims after his 20.3 fantasy point performance against Washington in week 2. But I also told you guys, like, maybe be a little bit hesitant because that was off of 2 receptions, although he turned those 2 receptions into 113 receiving yards and a touchdown. Just wasn't sure how consistent that was really going to be going into week 3. And he did show up against the Miami Dolphins, but there's kind of an asterisk here. Does your league give you points for special teams return touchdowns or not? If they did, then he finished with 16.6 fantasy points off of 3 receptions and 73 receiving yards on top of that return game touchdown. So kind of a gray area here, but hey, technically speaking, we have back-to-back weeks where Marvin Mims has scored double digits in full PPR. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, good enough weeks in week 2. Don't get me wrong, they both hit double digits as well. But this offense is a mess. There's room for all these wide receivers to be productive, mainly because they're going to be playing from behind quite a bit because their defense is even more of a mess somehow than the offense. I mean, for crying out loud, like we said at the beginning of the video, they gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins. But all those points aside, like I said, I do think Mims can get production in this offense, even with Jeudy and Sutton in front of him. He's shown enough flashes that, especially in deeper leagues, he's worth taking a look at. Plus, in week 4, they have an incredible matchup with probably the next most disastrous team in the league and the Chicago Bears, who have an awful defense. So Mims, rostered in 28% of leagues right now. I think he's worth the ad. You might not be starting him right now, but the upside is there. The production can certainly be there as well. Mims worth a look moving into week 4. All right, want to talk about one tight end for today's video as well. We're going with Luke Musgrave of the Green Bay Packers. I mean, this offense, while they've been missing Aaron Jones and Christian Watson, they look pretty productive, to say the least. They look like they can come back when they need to. They look like they can finish games. Jordan Love has looked incredible to start the year. Let's face it, he's been a great fantasy quarterback as well. So, I mean, depending on how large your league is, go check if Jordan Love is available. But, guys, Luke Musgrave had his best fantasy performance in week 3 in a tough matchup against the Saints. 10.9 fantasy points, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 49 receiving yards. And don't forget, he dropped that touchdown in week 1. He had a massive week 1, and I thought he, for sure, it looked like he was going to score in week 3 as well. But nonetheless, guys, this Packers offense is going to throw the football. And when Jones and or Watson eventually come back, that's just going to continue to open things up for this offense as a whole. I think Luke Musgrave, as his rookie season continues to go on, is just going to get more and more productive. And when we look at the Packers' upcoming schedule, it's very favorable as well for this passing offense. The Lions in week 4, Vegas in week 5, a bye week in week 6, but then Denver and Minnesota in week 7 and weeks 8. I think this offense is just going to continue to kind of build momentum, and Musgrave's going to be a big part of that. Whether they get their other playmakers back, like I said, I think that can be good for Luke Musgrave. And even if they don't, well, obviously he's providing you with a pretty safe floor on a weekly basis, 8 or more fantasy points in 2 of the first 3 games of the season for Musgrave. He's rostered in 25% of leagues. If you're struggling at the tight end position, which, let's face it, a lot of us are here in the 2023 season so far, I think Musgrave is certainly worth an add, even if he's just on your bench moving into week 4. All right, last player for today's video, we're going to go with a quarterback. We're going to talk about CJ Stroud, who made the quarterback and tight end streaming video for week 3, which those videos don't get a lot of buzz, but guys, they're worth checking out because of calls like CJ Stroud, who had 25 points in week 2 against the Colts, and similar to Dell, I said last week, I'm not 100% positive he's going to be able to repeat that type of performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars, at the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 3, but it's worth taking a shot on. And if you took a shot on Stroud, currently rostered in 32% of leagues, it absolutely paid off. 24.6 fantasy points, 30 passing attempts, 20 completions, 280 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 14 rushing yards for Stroud. Now has 24 or more fantasy points in his last 2 games. He gets a good matchup against Pittsburgh in week 4. I mean, obviously they have TJ Watt. They have some defensive playmakers. Their front seven's not necessarily awful, but the secondary gives up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers. And this passing offense for the Texans is just ripping the football. Nico Collins, Dell, Robert Woods, even a little bit of Dalton Schultz. We finally saw the run game get going this past week as well with Dameon Pierce to a degree. So CJ Stroud is in a good position. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still problems with this offense, but in terms of rookie quarterbacks right now, CJ Stroud overall looks the best. And man, they are letting him throw the football. I mean, 30 passing attempts was a low number in week 3. He had 44 or more passing attempts in each of the first 2 games as well. And let's just face it, things are just starting to mesh for this offense. I mean, kind of a misfit room of wide receivers, but they are really showing up for CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud should be rostered, especially if you're struggling at the quarterback position, whether you're worried about Joe Burrow's injury, or you own Justin Fields, or Aaron Rodgers got hurt and you're still in shambles, whatever it is. Stroud is worth picking up as a backup quarterback or potentially a quarterback we can play, especially against soft defenses. And he's undoubtedly a player in Superflex and double quarterback formats who we can start playing on a week-to-week basis regardless of matchup. So like I said, rostered in 32% of leagues. That's going to change as we approach week 4. And that'll do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy the content today, be sure to subscribe on the way out. This is all we do here. Free fantasy football content all year round. Redraft, Dynasty, and Best Ball. If you guys are into that, like I said, it's free to subscribe. Go ahead and do it. And like I said in the beginning of the video, guys, if there are any players who arise from the Monday night games, I will pin that in a comment down below so you guys can know to look for those players as well. If there's any players who maybe I didn't put on today's list that I think are still worth adding, I'll pin them down below in the comments as well. More importantly, if you guys have any fantasy football questions for your own roster, starts, sits, trades, waiver advice, whatever you guys need, drop it down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And with that, I will say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.